Hey, everybody. Okay. So I got a question from someone saying, Nora, I don't know what I can do to support Palestinians, folks in Gaza, and to force our politicians to finally make the right decision. And this is a question, of course, that has been asked by activists nonstop since October 7th. And there's been a lot of things that have been done and a lot of things that have worked, a lot of things that have built capacity and built solidarity around calling for an end to the attacks and end to the destruction of Gaza. But having been asked this question at the exact same time as having met with the Palestinian representative to Canada, Mona Abu Amara, really made me say, okay, you know what? I'm going to talk about this in a video. So here it is. Here we go. Here it is. Here you are. Here it is. So I've had a chance to meet with Mona before. She's so wonderful and so lovely. And as you can imagine, so frustrated with how horrible and horrifying the Canadian response has been to Palestine for nonstop. Not that things have actually changed very much in terms of Canada's approach to Palestine, its approach to Gaza since October 7th. But in thinking through this question, what can we do as Canadians? And having heard her talk about all of the ways in which Canada has failed, the frustration between knowing that we have to do something as engaged and active citizens and seeing how bad things are getting and how our government, our politicians are not actually helping. In fact, they're making things worse. It's a moment to pause. So let's take stock of where we are. All right. The Canadian government, in the aftermath of the International Criminal Justice decision, has decided to pretend to be neutral. But in pretending to be neutral, it has not taken any steps to actually stop Canada's implication, stop Canada's involvement, stop Canada's support for what Israel is doing in Gaza. And the principal way that we can do that in Canada is to stop sending arms to Israel. Now, today, the date is January 30th. Alex Kosh at the Maple has just published something to say that they have finally gotten proof that Canada has green-lighted more arms deliveries to Israel since October 7th, since we've seen the unbelievable destruction, the more than 26,000 people killed. Canada is still greenlighting weapons sales to Israel. And so when we see the International Court's decision to say things are very bad, Israel needs to stop or be stopped, things have to end, what they're doing in Gaza has to stop because it very well could turn into a genocide. Of course, this is court languages, very, specific kinds of questions being asked within the court case, talking in a way that average people don't talk. Canada looks at this and does not say it will stop arms transfer to Israel. Actually, instead, what we do is we say that we're not going to increase any funding to UNRWA, the agency that has, since the beginning of Israel's occupation of Palestine, provided services to the Palestinian people. Now, there's a very clear campaign that is trying to shift our attention from Hamas being terrorists to UNRWA being terrorists, a United Nations body that delivers everything from education to healthcare, vaccines. They are the terrorists now because no longer is it tenable for us to believe that 26,000 people killed in a population of 2.2 million people are all Hamas, they're all terrorists. You can't tell us that a child is Hamas. You can't even tell us that every single male over the age of 16 is a terrorist, which is, of course, what Israel is trying to get the world to believe and what Canada is more or less willing to go along with. We also have Pierre Poilievre, who is saying that UNRWA is a terrorist organization and that he would cut their funding completely. And so, you would think that as more and more of a global consensus forms publicly, loudly around Israel needing to stop what it's doing, that we would see action in Canada from our politicians that would make sense, that would say, oh, we don't actually want to be implicated in this. Maybe we should reconsider our arms exports, for example. But of course, they're not just going to do this benevolently. They will have to be forced. They will have to be dragged kicking and screaming to stop their full-throated, total support of what Israel is doing. And so we get back to the question, what can we do? What can Canadians possibly do? We had a very good example of this yesterday when the National Council of Canadian Muslims had a meeting with Justin Trudeau as part of lobby days related to the National Day Against Islamophobia, related, of course, to the 7th anniversary of the attack at the Islamic Cultural Center in Quebec City, in Sainte Foy, very close to where I live and where I'm recording. And the NCCM decided to not meet with Trudeau as a sign of their frustration and disapproval of how the federal Liberals have been dealing with or not dealing with Gaza. That at 26,000 people dead, more than 10,000 children, more than 1% of the children's population in Gaza has been killed. And so here is an organization that has traditionally been very close to the Liberals, using whatever leverage it has, in this case, a lobby meeting, to make its point to say, we're not meeting with Justin Trudeau. That has effects, that has ripples. And so looking at that, we all have a responsibility in our lives to say, well, what levers do we all have in our workplaces, primarily in our workplaces, but also in our communities, in popular organizing? What can we do? Well, there are so many options. The obvious ones are when there's a rally, go to the rally. Now, there's fewer rallies because it's pretty cold out there, and rallies in the middle of the winter can be really difficult and brutal, and therefore the turnout's not great. And so then, strategically speaking, is it good to have a small rally, or is it better to have no rally and other actions? People need to have those debates. But there's been a lot of other things too. Every one of us has a member of parliament. And if you haven't been in touch with your member of parliament, whether calling their office, call their office. That's a more powerful way to demonstrate your discontent. Call the office, talk to the staff person who answers the phone. You can email the person, your member of parliament or their staff or whatever with your discontent, or asking them questions or demanding to know what they're going to do. And this you have to do regardless of who it is, of what party they're in. If they're in the Liberals, if they're in government, of course, you make reference to the fact that they are the ones that control things right now. They can do things. If you're emailing conservative, the Conservatives need to understand that these are deeply unpopular decisions and it will hurt their ability to get elected. If you're emailing the NDP right now, oh my God, the NDP, they're the key to the Liberals' majority right now. Right? The NDP literally holds up the Liberal majority. And so if your local representative is an NDP member, you should be demanding why they're not using the leverage of their supply and confidence agreement to force the Liberals to, at the very least, stop the arms trade to Israel. At the very least. The Bloc, you can do the same thing. They're a little bit better and a little bit different, but of course, be in touch with your Bloc MPs as well. If you happen to live in one of the random locations in this country with a Green Party MP, do the same thing, of course. They'll probably be happy to hear from you, and maybe even will read out your letter in the House of Commons, who knows. But, then we can talk about other kinds of action, like direct actions, like occupying people's offices, looking within your own workplace and seeing the connections that your job might have with the federal government and federal decision making. And can you make statements? Can you bring things up in meetings? Can you refuse to work on certain things that are related to the federal government as a result of these decisions? These are all options. The thing I think that is the most important is that we don't act alone. We never act alone. It is fine, of course, to shout down a politician. This happened last night in Quebec City. Someone shouted down Jean-Yves Duclos in the middle of the ceremony to commemorate the attack in the mosque. I personally pretty kind of critical of that strategy in a ceremony where people are on edge because we're in a place where something happened that was surprising and it ended up being a gunman and he killed 6 people. But, you make the strategic decisions that you make. Jean-Yves Duclos was present. He's the Minister of Procurement. And so that was the strategic decision. But you don't want to act by yourself. You don't want to act by yourself. You want to make sure that your tactics are good enough to at least convince another person, right? If you can't find someone else to say, yeah, you know what, rappelling off of that building with a huge Palestinian flag, I repel too, I'm not sure that's a great idea, then you can, maybe that's a red flag for your strategic decision making. But you make collective decisions and you will come up with the strongest and the best ideas to fight back against these forces, to raise the profile of, to call for changes to, and whatever. So number one, make sure that you are acting with other people. It's also really important because if you're taking action at work, a letter that is written by 5 different people or 3 different people is going to have a different impact than just one person, right? It's much harder to go after 10 people than it is to go after a single person, which is also another reason why we should never act alone if we can avoid it. And looking at these pressure points and knowing that this very well will, we're not sure, sink the popularity of the Liberals. They could hand the election to Pierre Poilievre, which is ironic because, he's even worse on all this stuff. We have to get organized. And getting organized means committees, coalitions, groups of people coming together, debating tactics, coming up with a longer term strategy of how you're going to do this. Is your goal to get a meeting with your local representative? Is your goal to have an office occupation to demand something? The occupation's the tactic, the strategy includes the occupation to get them to do something, right? And the goal, of course, is to get Canada to have a better position on Gaza. Without structures, we are sunk. And structures can be anything. They don't have to look one particular way. But what they do have to be is open enough that other people can enter the space who really want to do the work. And so if you are doing Palestinian solidarity work right now, you have to make sure that people are able to get involved in that work. If it's tightly controlled by 2 or 3 people, it's not going to be strong enough. If it's tightly controlled even by 6 or 7 people, it's not going to be strong enough. If you don't have an ability to welcome and absorb new people into these movements, we will not be strong enough to endure even a year of organizing. We certainly won't be strong enough to go up against the Conservatives because they are a different kind of machine than the Liberals. So in this moment, look for where those points of organizing are. And if you're really, really passionate, you want to get more involved than simply attending events, then be in touch with organizers and say, I have a little bit of time. I have this skill. I want to make the next poster if you let me, or I have a great idea or whatever. And try to find ways to bring people in because there is so much urgency that we cannot organize this incorrectly. We have to organize this with all of the skills and all of the knowledge that we have of how organizing happens and why effective organizing is so powerful. We have justice on our side. We have justice on our side. You can never go wrong when you're on the side saying, stop killing children. But the question, of course, is that how do we then move to the organizing structures that will put the kind of pressure necessary on politicians to actually make the right decisions? If you like this video, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like it. Comment in the comment section. What are you doing? How are you organizing? How are you bringing in new people? Or are you located somewhere and you're struggling to find people? Post that in the comments too, because maybe we can make some connections that way.